Welcome to this special interview on a significant day in Guyana's history. October 5 marks a significant day in the sense of Guyana's democratic transformation. And with me to discuss this particular issue is Presidential Advisor on Governance, Ms. Gail Teixeira,
Hi, hello.
and Minister of Housing and Water, Irfan Ali.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. And thanks for joining us. October 5, 1992 marked a significant day in Guyana's history and its democratic transformation. If I could begin by asking you first, Mr. Teixeira, what this democracy meant for Guyana then and now?
Well, I think that it is with great pride that we talk about October 5th because at this time, 20 years ago, people were going to the polls. And it is the first free and fair elections that were held in Guyana after a period of 28 years in which there were rigged elections. The votes of our people were stolen. And so we had governments headed by Mr. Burnham as Prime Minister and President, and Mr. Hoyt, in which the voice of the people was denied and taken away from them. And so one of the critical things that we fought for throughout all the period was the right to have electoral reform and the right to count the ballots at the place of poll. So no matter what happened afterwards to the ballot box, we had a statement of poll. And so October 5th was so special, especially for persons like myself who had been around for quite a while in that period. But the struggle for democracy, after we got independence, the struggle for democracy was a long one. And we came out as the oldest opposition party that had been kept out of power for 28 years in I think, the whole world, definitely in the Western Hemisphere. But we were the only political party to have been in the outside of government for 28 years and to come back with an astounding majority. That had never happened anywhere else. And so October 5th signals the empowerment of our people, the people expressing their choice, and the support of the international observers, the support of the international community was critical. We came out of a situation where the majority of people had no say in what went on. And for the younger generation, just to give an example comparatively, is that the PNC actually got 5 additional years in government without going to elections, and that was through when we were supposed to have 1978 elections. We instead had a referendum for a constitution, which nobody saw what that constitution looked like. But it was a referendum to say, yes, we wanted a new constitution, which came into being in 1980. The boycott, the opposition and the progressive forces, PPP and others, boycotted that. Yet the result came out that 80% of the people of Guyana wanted to have a new constitution, which no one had seen. So that if we contrast that with when the PPP-C gets into government, the signal that you had, the only way you could build and restore democracy in Guyana was by free and fair elections, the people's right to choose, and restoring that. The second phase began with then looking at putting in place the democratic framework which had been eroded, destroyed, undermined. And so Dr. Jagan, as president, first statement in Parliament, his inaugural speech, was to do with making Parliament a deliberative forum and making it the place, a lawmaking place in which everyone had a voice. We started the constitutional reform process in 1995 with the then Attorney General, Bernard DeSantis. The public may not be aware that the PNC at the time were not in favor of constitutional reform. They were totally opposed to it and therefore did not really participate, and we went across the country talking about what people wanted. After the violence of 97 and 2001 elections, you have the creation between those two elections of the constitutional reform process and the commission, which was extremely broad-based. So unlike what the PNC did before with the 1980 constitution, which no one knew what it was, including the opposition party, the PPP, in the period when we came into government, the whole process of constitution reform was taken to the people. This is an important ingredient of democracy, that the people had a say. And so there were these thousands of meetings across Guyana, memoranda presented to the Commission, in which we have come out with what I believe is a progressive, modern constitution that is unparalleled in comparison with some of our neighboring countries. And so it took one of the most important sections of the 1980 Constitution to do with human rights. The human rights section of the 1980 Constitution was not enforceable. So you had to have a law to make a particular right enforceable. The new Constitution says that the human rights section, that anybody can go to the courts on a constitutional motion. You don't need to have a law in place to be able to do that. So this has opened up a whole area of human rights that any Guyanese citizen who feels that their human rights have been violated, they can go directly to the courts. Second component was the creation of the rights commissions as an avenue for complaints, an avenue for advocacy, an area for recommendations for change and so on. We also totally reformed Parliament by bringing into the Constitution of Guyana parliamentary reform, expanded committee system, standing committees, the Auditor General reporting directly to the Speaker and to the National Assembly instead of the Minister of Finance, for example. The reform of the judiciary in a number of ways to do with the appointment of the Chancellor and Chief Justice. The inclusive governance model that the Constitution has, which is evolving. This Constitution amendments came 2001 and so on. It's a short gestation period for any country. The United States took 300 years in terms of their constitution, and it is still being tested today. Britain doesn't have a constitution. We do. And so what we have is an inclusive governance model, which is unique to Guyana, where the leader of the opposition has a veto vote on the president of this country in terms of constitutional appointees. The Chancellor, the Chief Justice. The leader of the opposition gives to the president 6 names from which the chairman of the GCOM is selected. Now, which government in the region has that you're giving to the opposition the power to name who will be the chairperson of your elections commission that manages your elections? Many governments in our region would not take that chance. And so the architecture of the state in Guyana has been radically reformed. And it is the democratic framework within which everything happens. The judiciary, the economy, social services, human rights, a range of areas that you could think about, how the security is managed, etc. And we have not finished the constitutional reform process. In the last parliament, we brought in recall legislation, and we brought in the creation of a new parliamentary standing committee to oversight the security sector, which no other country in the CARICOM has, where we are actually oversighting the operations, the functions of the joint services, the disciplined forces of Guyana. And so we even also brought in issues, and these were supported, in other cases implemented by laws. Anybody looking at the legislative agenda for the last 20 years would be, I think, impressed. Anybody who's not impressed is just being mean-minded, I believe, because we have reformed the judicial sector, the financial sector, the natural resources, mining, fishing, agriculture, the children's legislations, the women's legislation, sexual offences, domestic violence, yes, medical termination of pregnancy, etc., etc. You could go through the hundreds of bills that have been passed that have radically reformed the regulatory framework of how the government operates and how different sectors operate. And then we have, to go back to Parliament, the issue of the oversight of the government. The Public Accounts Committee has been empowered in a variety of ways to scrutinize the government's expenditure and the use of taxpayers' money. And it has been effective in the last 20 years. I see in this Parliament there's some slippage. We haven't done anything in relation to the Auditor General's report of 2010. We seem to be fussing under the new chairman of all sorts of inconsequentials. But the power is there. And we also have the other standing committees, and in particular the sectoral committees that are in the Constitution that oversight the government's performance, its policy in the economic services, social services, foreign services, and natural resources. I think that when we look at the 20 years that Guyana has gone through such a radical transformation in its democratic architecture and framework, that we should be proud as Guyanese, not just PPP and PPP-C in government, but as Guyanese, that we have such a progressive approach. The naysayers will say that we haven't done as much as we should have, and there's a process. It's a process. We have gone through consultations. The other aspect of the democratic framework is a policy direction started under Cheddi Jagan and has remained under all the presidents, President Cheddi Jagan, President Sam Hines, President Cheddi Jagan, President Jagdeo, and now President Ramatar, that staying in contact with people and including people, inclusive governance, the consultations that are held on policies, low carbon development, avoided deforestation, strategic plans on various sectors, developmental plans for different regions, the housing program, water, you could go on, for a long time on that. People have a say. They have a contribution. There are community meetings. Every minister is required to go out and meet. And our ministers are visible. They're accessible. Ministers have their public days. Ministers' cell numbers and email addresses are known all over the place. So that the issue of ensuring that when we take a policy decision or we introduce a program, that we have the voices of the people, the voices of the relevant sectors that have contributed. And in that process, people contribute to amending, changing, and we go through a reformulation of whether we were right or wrong and how to reconstruct it. This is what democracy is about. It's the process, the framework, the constitutional and legislative framework, the parliamentary framework, and also the process how we move from one point to another. If we take controversial legislation we brought in, medical termination, domestic violence, sexual offences, these all went into parliamentary select committees. People brought memoranda to that and were passed in the House. And so we feel proud as Guyanese, as PPP and PPP-C members, that we have radically transformed this country. 20 years later, we have to look at what are the risks we face. I'll stop at that point for a while, because I think we need to talk about we've achieved and to make sure there's no slippage backwards, that we do not go back.
I'm going to get into 20 years on. Minister Ali, I particularly want you to pronounce, and as Mr. Chair spoke about, significant transformation, legislative and other democratic transformation in Guyana over the past 20 years. I want you to speak somewhat to the economic transformation, but before you do, just speak a bit more, perhaps, in addition to what Mr. Chair might have spoken about the democratic transformation.
Thank you very much, Gordon. I think Comrade Gail Teixeira really summed it up nicely, and there's so much to say on what this democracy meant and mean to our country even now as against an undemocratic society. But before I venture into that direction, I want to take this opportunity on behalf of the People's Progressive Party civic government to thank the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of persons who participated in the process in 1992 and continues to participate in that process today, to ensure that democracy that was won in 1992 continue to be upheld and continue to see growth and development. There are many unsung heroes in every single region, Comrade Gale will tell you, our comrades who fought through the days of being locked away behind bars, the days of staying hungry, the days of being beaten, just for what? Just for what they believed in. And what they believed in was that we, the people of Guyana, deserve to live in a democratic society, a free society, and an open society. So I start by really thanking those heroes and heroines who would have paved the way for us today. And from then to now, what is democracy meant to us? Right here in the media, you see today, and many people would ask Comrade Teixeira and us in the government, why do we tolerate the level of indiscipline in the media and the level of mischief sometimes in certain sections of the media? But we understood, and the leaders at that time and now understood very clearly, that democracy brings with it these challenges. And if you want to ensure that the democracy grow and the democracy is tolerable, then you have to accept these as challenges. This from a time when situations like these would have never been tolerated is an unbelievable accomplishment. Then you look at what constituted a democracy and how this democracy was fought against. Even after the fair and fair elections in 1992, you remember and recall what happened on the street. Of course, the notes from the Freddie Kisu notebook, I hope, are still in the archives, because there were live pictures of what was happening to show an institution in the PNC then that did not believe at all in this democracy, an institution that believed in taking all measures to ensure that the outcome of the democratic process was not respected. So in the journey that came out of that democracy that was born in 1992 was a very complex journey. You will recall that after that we lost a lot of time, and the leader then of the opposition, the late Desmond Hoyt, said that he gave the government 100 days to survive, because he knew what they left in government, and he also knew that the social dimension and the pressure they were putting on this new democratically elected government could not have the government could not have won out. But it is because of the sane leadership of the PPP-Civic government at that time that ensured that the government won out. And today we saw that we see that we have gone far beyond the 100 days. Then remember in 1997, here is it that again the undemocratic forces sought to take the country back. And that is why I want Comrade Kale to talk about the risk in the future. In 1997, there was a strong movement to take back this democratic country to undemocratic norms. You remember that the government had to cut its term. Democratically elected government had to give up 2 years of governance because of what was taking place. And what was taking place? A woman who had given all her life to Guyana, Comrade Cheddi Jagan, someone who was in the struggle for independence, in the forefront of the struggle for independence, was being denied the right by an undemocratic institution in the opposition then to govern, although she was democratically elected by the people of this country in a free and fair election. Then you look at the 2001 elections. As you know, the undemocratic forces came out in its full force in that election. And you remember the fire on the streets, the burning down, the call for more fire, slow fire, and so on. You remember how these events threatened the democracy that we have won. And this is where I want to salute the leadership of the PPP-Civic government. It is a leadership that remains sane, remains stuck to the task of ensuring democracy is won and upheld, and did not fall to the partisan kind of politics and the kind of ethnic sentiments of the politics that was played out during this period. It's a period too that the government went through, the country went through some of its greatest disasters, the great floods. We won't forget that. So it has been a challenging time from then to now. It has been a time from then to now where democracy has been tested to its wildest end, to the end of where violence was used, to the end where street protests led to burning of buildings, destruction of property,
Beating of people.
beating of people. Some people were stripped naked and left to run on the road. So this was a test that democracy endured throughout this process. And as Comrade Gail said, I will really like her to really speak about what are the risks that can come in the future, because young people need to know that this democracy that we guard so strongly can be easily taken away. Then let us look at what the undemocratic society had and what a democratic society brought to us. We had an undemocratic society that did not respect the office of the Auditor General. You know that there was no audit report laid in the National Assembly. So there was no accountability. There was no accountability to government financing. There was no accountability to the people of the country. When democracy was won, one of the first things that the government did at that time was to ensure that the Auditor General performed his duties, and that audited financial report was laid in the National Assembly, and that the government was made accountable to the people. Because the government always felt that it has to be accountable to the people, the PP-Civic government. So that is one transformation from then to now in terms of the government accounting and financing. Then look at what an undemocratic society brought. Now, the natural resources that we have, gold, diamond, bauxite, rice, sugar, agriculture, they were all there under the undemocratic rule. But yet, under the undemocratic rule, what we had then was inflation that was triple digit. We had inflation that was triple digit. We had a debt burden of $2.1 billion. We had an empty treasury. Nil, not a single cent in a treasury. We had home loans that was at 37%. If you want to borrow a low-income loan for your house. We had commercial industrial loan that was at 42% and 40% respectively. We had our minimum wage was the lowest. We were classified as second to Haiti in terms of underdevelopment. We had a situation where less than 40% of our children had access to secondary school. We had a situation where just about 70% of our people had access to primary education. So this is what then the undemocratic society had. This is what the undemocratic society was built on.
Speak a bit to the economic transformation. You've taken us into the economic realm.
And I'm going to take you to now. So from then, you had a home interest rate that was at 37%. Today, you can get a low-income loan at 3.8%. You had a debt burden that was $2.2 billion. Today, you have a debt burden that is 50% less. 48%, 52% less. It's only 48% of what it used to be. You had an empty treasury. Today, you have a treasury with over 900 billion. So you have a treasury that has moved from zero to that. You have inflation that was triple digit. Today, inflation is single digit, just about 5%. You had a minimum wage that was ridiculous. Today, you have a livable minimum wage. You had a situation where you had a poverty rate of 75%. Today, you have a poverty rate of 38%. These are all independent stats to show what was it then that was embodied in that undemocratic society, and what this new democratic society brought about in terms of economic change and economic transformation.
If we could interrupt, Mr. Shearer spoke, she said that they are the naysayers. And some of those naysayers perhaps would say more could have been done. Respond to that from an economic standpoint.
No, let us be clear about this. The government itself has said more can be done, and we want more to be done. We're not here to say that we live in a perfect world. Right. What we are here to say is that under the challenges, and I agree that more could have been done, take away the 2 years that we lost in 97 elections, take away the more fire and slow fire, and the violence that overtook the road in 2001. Take away the natural disaster of the flooding. Take away the horrible period of the crime wave that we tend to forget. When we, in this new dispensation, we're trying to forget that this horrible crime wave that we went through. Take away 6 years. Take away those challenges that we had. Guyana would have been far more advanced. Now, in 2006, Comrade Teixeira will tell you, to now, We have seen the greatest influx of investors because it was the most stable period of our history under this democratic rule.
Yeah.
But you know what? We see these things as the PP-Civic government sees these things as an institutional problem that the opposition had with democracy and ways in which they have tried to shoot democracy down. But I would say that to the naysayers, discount these challenges, discount these factual positions and situations that this government has faced, and then add what we have achieved. And I've shown, listen, this is the only country in the region, although we had all those challenges, that is going into its 6th, 7th year with positive economic growth. We're going into our 5th, 6th year with inflation less than 10%. We have been spared of the economic crisis not by guess or by luck. We have been spared because of the strong regulatory framework that Comrade Gail Teixeira spoke about, because of the strong institutional mechanisms that were put in place that has cushioned us. So I will say that, yes, and let us be very factual on this. There's a lot still to be done, right? But look at where we've come from. We came from a situation where you didn't have enough school for the children. You didn't have health centers. You didn't have a housing program. You didn't have infrastructure network. Whilst we had to correct all of these inefficiency existing within the system itself, we still had to create the massive economic advancement, economic transformation, which required a major investment in the major infrastructure like hydro. The new airport, these are some, and these are things that did not happen in just like that. These are things that has been consistently planned. Look at, for example, the Berbice River Bridge. We have talked about this throughout the history until we could have found the perfect financial investment blend that would have brought this to reality. So the future is bright, though. What I would say is that the foundation has been laid, but that future that is so bright, that is seeing so many investors coming in, can be bleak if this democracy, can be bleak if this foundation is I would say is uprooted. I was going to say if the foundation is shaken, but I think that there are signs out there that is already showing interest in shaking the foundation. It is how we guard, how we understand the importance of this foundation and what it means for us going forward.
You touch a bit on some elements of the social transformation. I'm going to speak with you shortly on some of those things that would shake the foundation of the democratic transformation. But in terms of the social transformation, in terms of social services, are Guyanese better off today?
I think that the answer to that question lies in the response from Guyanese. And you would see that Guyanese today would tell you, yes, we are better off. They would say, of course, that we need more. We need an additional level of development. But yes, from then to now, they will say very clearly that they're better off today. They must be better off today. Take, for instance, when we took over from the undemocratic regime, you had 285 squatter settlements. You had no housing program, widespread squatting, people living in absolute poverty, 85% of people living in poverty. And then today, you have been able to regularize 90% of those squatter settlements, giving them ownership, giving them title, giving them equity. A situation where nobody was given a house lot. The housing program was dead, shut down, closed, kaput. And now you have a housing program that has delivered almost 93,000 house lots to the people, 93,000 allocations to the people. So it's there. The facts are there. The reality is there. Look at the new Diamond Housing Scheme, the new Parfait Harmony Housing Scheme, the new Ankerville, Tushin. Every region in Region 2, on the Niming, Bartika, name it. Even in Cockrit Hill, we are developing housing now. And you see that this level of development now is changing the culture. Comrade Teixeira would tell you that the last 2 Show conference, the Amerindians are calling now for us to establish housing development and housing schemes in the hinterland community, and we have responded to that call. So then look at education. Just go in every village. Some areas never had access to secondary school. Today, it's compulsory that students have access. You even have the primary top-up. President Ramatara normally make the point that students were made to fail because the system could not have accommodated those students. Today, from moving from less than 40% or just about 40% in the undemocratic regime to today where you have almost 80% of our students having access to secondary education is a tremendous accomplishment. And the president is committed to take this to 100%. Moving from 70%, just about 70% to 100% access to primary education is a tremendous accomplishment. The new diagnostic center, Diamond, Lenora, the new ophthalmology center in Port Moran. These are all strong, tangible evidence of the transformation that has taken place. And I'm not speaking about the macro, the huge project. I'm speaking about these small, community-based, listen, the health centers in Luziknan, the health centers, the upgrade of the health centers in Buxton, in all these, in an interior location, Wakenham, Leg 1, the access. And we had a problem with access. Today, you might have a problem with level of service, which is incremental. Incrementally, we are trying to improve the level of service we offer to our people. That is why we're talking about a specialty hospital. But access is different from level of service. And we have transformed totally the issue of access to basic services and facilities. Look at water. Recall the famous pictures of the undemocratic regime. Persons with four-wheel cart pulling water down the road. You have to. I remember. I used to have to travel to go to Saints.
School to do that.
And before I go to school in the morning, you have to wake up 2 hours before to help fill water, and then you have to get ready to go to school. And when you come back in the afternoon before you do any homework, that's the other ritual that you have to complete. And the water, it wasn't easy. Women who were pregnant had to reach down, sometimes 4 feet down in the ground to get water, and then pull that water up. And it took away a lot from the family. It took away from the empowerment of the family, and it took away from earning potential of the family. So instead of housewives today in that undemocratic period, learning a trade or working on something to add to the income of the family, they were busy trying to spend hours finding water. Then they have to worry about maybe getting something for the kids to eat. These were all the challenges. The undemocratic regime even locked out essential foods from the people, banning these foods. Now, we have pursued the same the policy of buy local, grow more, and even expanded it to feeding the Caribbean. But we have not, in a dictatorial manner, locked out the choices of people or the democratic right of a person to eat what he feels like eating. We have not done so. So the then and now is incomparable. But I think that this story is very important for this story to be told so that the history of this country that is being manipulated now, that is being misguided now, that is being reoriented now, can really be addressed. And I'm still very happy that we have the strong leaders like Comrade Gail Teixeira, the persons who fought through the dictatorship to win democracy, still here to ensure we guard that democracy. Because in her lies a spirit that understand how important this is to Guyana. Many young people today, and we have to face the reality, do not understand because inside us does not possess that spirit of what it meant to live through that period and now what it means to guard this democracy that we have won. So I know I'm going on, Michael.
Guarding the democracy. No, interesting points, but guarding the democracy, and it comes back to a point made by Minister Ali as it relates to particular forces shaking the foundation of this democracy. November 28, 2011 marked there came a significant junction in the road of democracy, November 28, 2011. And Minister Ali spoke about forces now perhaps attempting or shaking the foundation of democracy. Could you speak to those forces and how the PPP-C government intend to perhaps overcome these forces?
You know, the 20 years of what is called at the international level restored democracies. There's a phrase they use, emerging and restored democracies. Guyana is an emerging and restored democracy. 20 years, a short period of time. It is still fragile. It's still fragile. It's being implemented, but it has not completed its process. And therefore, the fragility of our democracy is one that must be respected. After you get to 100 years and so on, you're kind of grown up, but 20 years is a very fragile period for democratic nations. We've seen in other parts of the world, democracies have emerged from dictatorships and how quickly, at the drop of a hat, they can be reversed. We have seen in our own region recently procedures in relation to presidents being removed. We have seen in other parts of the world some very strange occurrences in terms of democratic governance.
Of Parliament, the standing orders.
Yeah, so I mean, we have to put ourselves in that place and not believe that this structure is as consolidated. What we're really into, we were in the first 20 years reconstructing, restoring, creating the constitutional and democratic framework. The next phase is really about consolidating, protecting, guarding, and advancing. And so when you asked me about that, is that you have November 28, 2011 elections in which we see in Parliament the manipulation, the erosion of the standing orders. We have seen, despite attempts to talk, and to just pause for a minute, my comrade here, Irfan, talked a lot about the PPP leadership. One thing that has held us through as a party, we're now 62 years, so a little bit older than I am, but that we have withstood, we have had wisdom. Leadership isn't about reactive and not being responsible. The PPP's leadership has been responsible, wise, sane, sensible, dependable, and has also had vision. It has a vision of the country. And it has also many times had to, throughout all the years, even when the cause was righteous, to not go in certain directions because we did not want this country to descend into civil war, into ethnic conflict. And so many of the criticisms that are made about Cheddi and why it took so long for us to get to where we got to in October 5th, 1992, does not comprehend that political leadership is about being responsible and about taking nation first and dealing with nation first. What we have seen in this episode, and I call it an episode from November 28 to 2011, of despite the president inviting people to come talk. Let's talk about setting up a parliament. Let's talk about the budget. Let's talk about Linden. All these things. They have smashed through with their one vote. Up at the speaker, the deputy speaker, they're the only parliament, we're the only parliament in the whole world that the speaker and the deputy speaker are controlled by the opposition. That's unheard of.
And even when we had the majority.
And always, since we had the majority in 1992, the opposition always got the deputy speaker. We never contested that. Whoever they put up, we supported. We have had them taking control of the parliamentary committees. We've had them cut the budget. We've taken to court. They've come back. They've cut again. They've reduced us to zero and stuff like that. The behavior in Parliament, the motions that are brought, the number of them that will go down in history as being unwise, inappropriate, unconstitutional, that were brought into the Parliament in these short 8 months of this Parliament. Unheard of. Every Parliament has a period over the years that you may have one instances. We have had a consistent period, a period of consistent undermining of the standing orders and the norms and practices of parliamentary conventions under the Commonwealth or in any other part of the world. That's the risk. It's a risk. We have seen a resort to violence in the midst of attempting to solve problems. We have seen the same type of bullyism emerging out of other spheres of life, not just Parliament, but other spheres of life. We have had discussions with the opposition on major issues because we have always believed that we could talk to the opposition and try to reach agreement or compromise. That has all been done. And so we have a risk that with what I believe is, in some cases, leadership that is opportune and opportunistic, and in some cases, leadership that is naive and don't have the political maturity to deal with certain issues. If the public out there believes that Dr. Cheddi Jagan, God rest his soul, didn't come under opposition in his party or at the community level with supporters, you're fooling yourself. But he always was able to chart a path to let people understand, not to have the tail wag the dog, or what is it? The tail wag the dog. It was the leadership from the head of the dog, not this. And what we've seen now in this 8-10 months is the tail is wagging the dog, whether that is because of opportunism, that they're glad that these things are happening so they can cause greater instability and cause certain problems. We face serious risks. Let me go back to the 60s. When the PPP came out of government in 64.
It was rigged out.
And it was the duplicity of the British government who had a choice to let the PPP take the government as it had under PR, the majority of the votes, and or to create an coalition between the TUF and the PNC and hand the government to them. The present Queen of England, Majesty Queen Elizabeth, is the one who signed the decree giving the government to Mr. Burnham and Mr. Degar. So it went that high in world politics. But in 1964, when we left office, Guyana was ranked 3rd in the entire region for its economic growth. And we were a colony still. But under the PPP administration from 1953, and we only lasted 100-odd days, and then we were kicked out, overthrown by the British government and the British Army, our peoples arrested, and then they worked with the PNC in Burnham to create an alternative to the PPP, and that failed consistently. 97, 61, 64. But we came out of government with a country that at an economic level and a social level, health programs, housing programs, that Mrs. Jagan was in particular the leader of that and the visionary in that. So our image is good. We have a lot of money flowing in from loans and so on, from the IMF and everybody. And what happens by 1973? We're in debt. By 1980, we can't get any loans from the IMF. We have no credit worthiness. 1985 then is the Economic Recovery Program, which took Guyana and threw us even further down because the recipe was so harsh. But the image of Guyana in 64 was a country that had potential. By 1980s, we are known for Jonestown Massacre. We were the only country in the world where you had 900 souls that were massacred in a non-war situation. It was only beaten and overtaken by the September bombing attack on in New York in September the 11th.
Which is considered a war situation.
Yeah, so that the issue was that our image, people came in to invest, we got loans. By 92, when we got into office, our image as a country was zero. To bring investors to our country, we have to improve our image. This is a stable country. It has a democratically elected government. The country looks as if it's trying to emerge. Our image between 2006 and 2011, 2012 has never reached that point ever before in our history. So it takes a lot of work when you fall to the bottom of the ladder to get back up, not only for the country, but your image. When the Eurasia Group comes to Guyana this year and says they want to put us on the modeling for other countries that they see as emerging markets to attract investors, this is a big issue. This is a big issue. Only 22 countries in this hemisphere are on that listing of countries that say to investors in the world, look at that chart to see which countries have good potential for investment. So that we don't operate as an island, we operate in a global context. One, the other risk we face is the economic unpredictability in the global situation. We also, as a country, recognize that the global situation impacts on aid. We also have the issue of, as a country, Cheddi Jagan always talked about South-South cooperation. Who are we cooperating now? Our big friends and allies, partners in investment and everything else. Brazil, India, China. Cuba has always been our friend. And we'll be eternally grateful to Cuba for what it has helped Guyana in the worst of our times. And they have been a partner that we could never, ever, repay for what they've done for Guyana. So that our options now, South-South cooperation, that image, the work that Irfan does with tourism to attract people to our country, it's all about trust and confidence, not only in our society, amongst ourselves, but in the international market. President Jagdeo took climate change to the international arena, a little country in the world that was known for Jonestown and rigged elections before 92, suddenly emerges on the world arena, amphitheater, as a country talking about green economy and low carbon development strategy, and has an agreement with the Kingdom of Norway, etc., etc. We suddenly now, our image globally has changed. Our image with our neighbors have changed. This is good. So when Irfan talks about investment, so this is fragile. Anything start to wobble, people begin to pull out.
Minister Ali.
So I turn to him.
Just to add something to what Gail spoke about, and that is image. And we have to understand how important this image is to investors and to the wider world, and how our image has changed from the period of undemocratic rule to now. Comrade Gail would tell you that we didn't do any fancy spending in foreign affairs. For a matter of fact, most of the budget under the dictatorship went towards foreign affairs and basically flying around the world. Yeah. Right? They had delegation of 80 persons, entire plane load of delegation going to attend some meetings. What did we accomplish? What was Guyana known for? We were known for undemocratic rule. We were known for a dictatorship. We were known for a country in ruin. And this is all how the international community described us. Immediately after democracy, look at how we have been known. President Dr. Cheddi Jagan, the late Dr. Cheddi Jagan, the new human global order. Known throughout the world for pushing this strategy, and a strategy that was adopted by the United Nations. Then you go the low carbon development strategy. We are now sitting on UN commission. We are now sitting on UN committee, chairing those committee. We had a president who sat on the financial reform, the UN subcommittee on financial reform, the Secretary General Committee. We are now sitting on international committee. We had a champion of the earth. We have President Ramatar, who in this very short period has revolutionized the input on education at the UN. Raising the issue of copyright is not an issue to raise, but the way he raised it has now ignited an international debate that is going on right now. So we have been able to accomplish all of this. Guyana is now described as a sleeping giant by some, a sleeping giant. It is described as a country on the verge, threshold of economic boom expansion. It is a country now that can attract companies like Repsol, the bauxite company, Bosai, huge company, huge investment companies coming into Guyana can attract investment banks, oil and gas can attract huge mining company. The Canadian Stock Exchange, they're all focusing on Guyana now. They're all taking an interest in what is happening in Guyana. And this is because of the image that has been changed. And why I raise this issue of image, the opposition understands how image is important. So what they have done over the last few years is to team up with certain sections of the media to, not in a nationalistic way, in a very partisan, selfish way that does not have the interest of Guyana at heart, to team up to damage that image, to portray Guyana's image in the international community as a country where crime is prevalent, where corruption is prevalent. And we had a corruption debate. The entire country saw the outcome of those debates. So this issue of image is like goodwill in any company. If you want to damage a company, attack the company goodwill. And I think what we are seeing is a protracted, targeted, strategic attack on the goodwill of the government, the image of the government, the image of the country. Very selfishly though, but at the end of the day, I think what is consuming the minds of those who are doing this is the issue of power and taking power by all means, measures, tactics, and strategy. And that is why not only must we guard the democracy and guard the gains, but we must also aggressively, proactively guard the image of the government. Let me give you one simple example of how image is important. There was a traditional image of Guy Expo. Even before Guy Expo started this year, I saw a big article in Peep and Tom. And of course, Mr. Derek Cummings responded quite adequately to that, calling it a fairground. You were there. Thousands of Guyanese was there. They complimented the way the products were produced. They were happy. But even before the event started, on the first night basically, you had this article targeting the event, trying to damage an image and create an image that is not necessarily associated with an event like this. So I'm just raising that as a small point to show you how the attack on image is strategic and focused.
This is an interesting topic, and it's one that we could go on for hours, but our time is almost gone. And in the closing, I'll ask both of you, of course, I should have said from the onset that both our Minister and Ali and I, on this day in 1992, were merely teenagers in our respective areas.
Yes.
I wish I could have said the same for Mr. Sheriff.
No, it's okay. I'm glad to be the elder. Just don't ask me my age in front of the media,
But in closing, I'll ask quite a hypothetical question, if it were. If you were to do this 20 years over, and of course this is in closing,
I would like
how differently would you do it? Okay, you go first.
She's someone who worked through it and lived through it now. Okay. But let me say this.
You grew up through it.
I would say this. I would judge it from my father's face and my mother's face. Both of them are long-standing persons in the education sector. I remember growing up under those days, the bleakness on my parents' face, the sense of hopelessness. And not hopelessness because they did not want to achieve. I remember my parents used to go and bring rice from Leguan to sell to supplement the income. My father used to plant a garden in the backyard and sell whatever extra produce. We used to peel dry coconut. And we had a family who had business. But although they had business, you still had to find means of supplementing your income. And I remember the bleakness, the sense of loss of hope, the sense that life has no... It's like in Palestine. The way you look at those people's face and you see how dreadful it is, the feature on the face when they speak about the country and the future, that was the period. And today, both my parents are alive, thank God. And when you look at their face and they talk about Guyana, you see a sense of hope, a sense of achievement, a sense that the country has achieved, and a sense that Guyana has place to go. You see them now. I remember that at one time, when the people gather up in the community, it was everybody trying to get somebody out of Guyana. Now, when the people gather up, they're all talking about what opportunities are there, how they can benefit, talking about a road in the village, what they need to do to get the road done, if they need to call Kamatishiro and cuss up and so to get the road done. And that is good. That is what you want the minds of people to focus on, taking the country forward and not burden that they live in a country where hope is non-existent. I close by saying hope was dead. Hope is alive today.
Mrs. Cheryl.
Yeah, you asked if we would do it any other way. I leave that for the analyst and the political analyst of the next 10 years or so to go through that. Political gestations are not overnight. And what you did a few years ago, sometimes the results and product doesn't show up until later on. But I think that the 20 years and what Guyana has achieved, I am proud as a member of the PPP and a member of the PPPC in government to have been given the honor and the responsibility of being part of this. I came back when I was 24 years old. I won't tell you when, but it's known. It's on my CV. So, but came back then, and my whole family abroad thought I was mad. Came back, and for me personally, I would not do anything different than what I did. But I'm also proud to belong to a party and a party in government that has been responsible, has been disciplined. As members, we have to be disciplined. When one is running a country, it is not about being careless and reckless. It's about being responsible. And we have taken a country from the depths of inequity, as some would say, to a state now of which we are ready to take off into greater heights. Everywhere you look, and I'll give the pictorial as Irfan was talking about. I traveled all over Guyana, and I'm proud of having given that opportunity to go to so many villages. I saw such destitute poverty, such destitute poverty. You don't see that now. I remember within a few days of becoming a Minister of Health, we were confronted with cholera epidemic in October. I was sworn in 13th of October, October 31st. And when we took the boats down the rivers and found where the first case came out of, there was nothing. There was nothing. And I have photographs of those days going to Amerindian villages, seeing stark, naked, destitute poverty. People had a hammock, a pot, that's it. And a couple plastic plates and a couple of spoons. Bedding, everything absent. The Guyana of then and the Guyana today are two different Guyanas. The Guyana of the past and the Guyana of the present. And in the present is the embryo of the future. Two different Guyanas. And so we have traversed a long path. Not an easy path. If we think the opposition, everybody sat around and said, okay, they won, let's get them a chance. Mm-hmm. That never happened. As Irfan correctly said, 92, violence after elections. 97 to 99, 2 years of violence, strikes, etc. 2001, violence after the elections. 2002 to 2008, the worst crime wave that Guyana has ever experienced. 2005, 2006, the big floods. It is in the 2006 to 2011 that we have the first stable point where this government could have breathed and been able to have the full 5 years without interruption to implement our programs. And that was the test. In those 5 years, we did more. We put our shoulders to the wheel. We had a leader like President Jagan who put an enormous amount of energy and vision and wisdom into what he was doing. And this country, all the foundation that built between 92 onwards, 2006, is the turnaround years. 2006, 2011, when Guyana moved from what was going up like this to make a quantum leap up. We have done it, and we have to protect and guard what we have achieved. Because, as Irfan says, the future is waiting for us. It's waiting for you. You talk about you being teenagers. I want to be able to see the fruits of the labor of those who came in the 50s in the independence movement, those who came in the struggle for democracy in the 70s, the group of the 90s, the transformation group, the group of the 21st century, of the moving Guyana into amazing heights, that all of us can look back and say that we were there and we each played our part. And I just want to end on this, that all of the tradition of our people of bearing our navel string when you're born. I don't know if the young ladies do it anymore, but I know it is done as a part of our cultural tradition. You bury someone's navel string when they're born to make sure. It's an old belief, it's an African belief, it's an Amerindian belief that you are then held to the earth, you're connected to Mother Earth. That all of us as Guyanese, ultimately, whether you vote APNU, AFC or PPP, this land is ours. It's ours, nobody else's own. And we all have to play a role to improving it. Whether on election day you go and vote for someone else, that's your business. But that each one of us must say, I played a part in improving my community, making my community better, making the children of our community have a better future, and that we're all proud as Guyanese. Why is it as Guyanese that some people in the press like to dress us down? What do you call undress us? When you go to Trinidad, you ever hear Trinidadians, when they meet in a social setting with Guyanese, Jamaicans, tear up their country and undress their country? You ever hear Jamaicans do that? And they have one of the worst homicide rates in the whole world, in Jamaica. You ever hear Jamaica tear down the government and talk about Portia and this one, this and this one? No. We got to stop this.
Nationalistic.
That we have to have pride and a national identity and a patriotic fervor. And this is what's going to move our country forward. So 20 years, October 5th, this was the turning point, and we must keep struggling. The struggle is not over, to do better and better as every day goes forward. Thank you.
Presidential Advisor on Governance, Ms. Gita, and Minister of Housing and Water and Minister of Tourism, Ministry and Culture, the Honorable Irfan Ali. Thanks for being a part of this program.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.